The following show is a Pod Avenue production.
This is the Young Bucks.
And you're listening to the This Is Awesome Wrestling Show. Too sweet me.
Hello, TIAWS fans. Yes, the podcast is back. This is Awesome Wrestling Show. I am your host, Glenn Moore, and it's been a while. It's been a few months since the RSS feed of the podcast has been active. Last show was a interview I did with the Beer City Bruiser of Ring of Honor, that was back in September. And I posted it because I had it in my back pocket for so long, and the show went in a little hiatus. So we basically have posted one show in the past 7 months. Last show was the end of September, and after that took a hiatus because we were studioless and didn't have the equipment to do a show on a regular basis. Just not able to do it. And first, I want to thank Aaron Seacrest and Gregory Iron for co-hosting one show. We did one show, and it wasn't anything against them. It certainly wasn't anything really against me. CLEsound.com just upped and moved to a different studio, and it took a while for their studio to get fully functional to record shows, which took almost a month. And after that, it just kind of was like, okay, well, I feel bad going back to Aaron and Greg to do the show. And I certainly didn't want to talk wrestling for a half an hour by myself, recording, with my little setup that I have. But it just was that month off kind of just killed the show for a little bit. And it kind of I lost my smile, so to speak, speaking in Shawn Michaels terms, lost my smile when it came to just talking wrestling. I kind of was like wrestling out, just not in the mood to talk wrestling, just kind of blah about it. And, there was a time where I didn't really watch WWE that much, or I caught just clips on YouTube. So it wasn't the love for the show just was not there. And the love for the show, even before the hiatus, just wasn't there. For a few months, it felt kind of like a chore to do the show. And there's various reasons for that I'm not going to get into. But it just felt like the show has, like I said, I lost my quote-unquote podcast smile. So after kind of getting myself up to do a show and kind of explain to you what the future is and kind of what happened in the last 5-6 months of the show being off the air. A lot of updates. I'm sure a lot of you who follow me on Twitter at GlenmoreCLE know that I am co-hosting a podcast with Jerry the King Lawler called Dinner with the King. And basically it's following the footsteps of a lot of wrestling podcasts out there. Love the Colt Cabanas of the world, of the Tony Schiavone, Eric Bischoff, of the Jim Cornette, of the Bruce Pritchard, all those wrestling podcasts. And I've been begging King to do a podcast, to have his own podcast. He has a ton of stories. And finally, with the help of my partner with podavenue.com, a podcast production /network, he is my partner. I cannot say anything would not do justice of what Chris Perez has meant to getting the podcast. Well, my love for the podcast back up and running. It's been amazing for him to be helping out with podcasting and trying to get a podcast company up and running. But the first client is Jerry the King Lawler. So we've been doing the podcast for about 10 weeks. It's called Dinner with the King. You can follow it on Twitter at Dinner with King. I'm sure a lot of you who listen to this show or still have this subscribed. First of all, thank you for not deleting our RSS feed from your podcast playlist / subscription services. But anyway, Dinner with the King, Jerry the King Lawler, a lot of stories. We're in the middle of an Andy Kaufman series talking about him and his run-ins with Andy Kaufman. We do Ask the King Anything, where a lot of questions were answered. He talks about the most relevant new wrestling news stories going on that I'll touch base. Also, give my opinion about that a little more in depth later on in this podcast. But I love it. I've been friends with Jerry Lawler for almost 7 years, and being able to hang out with him and shoot the shit with him and basically talk wrestling is just terrific. I relish our hours, our 1 or 2 hours a week that we sit down and do prep for the show and then record the podcast. And it's been a great 10 weeks of the show. And we just signed on with Midroll, the biggest podcast ad agency out there. So not only are we getting hundreds of thousands of downloads, we also, we're going to monetize this thing and hopefully grow. Like I said, within 10 episodes, we have hundreds of thousands of downloads for the show and continue to grow and get bigger and bigger. So I hope you check it out. Dinner with the King. Just search it on Google. Dinner with the King, Jerry Lawler Podcast, whatever you want to do your SEO for finding the show. But simple, podavenue.com/king is the homepage and has all the links to all of our RSS feeds and subscription, from iTunes to Stitcher to TuneIn to Podbean to we have a YouTube channel where I post actually clips of some relevant stuff with Jerry, but also full shows are on YouTube. So search Dinner with the King. It's out there. Now, Pod Avenue has This Is Awesome Wrestling show. And I've been so busy getting Jerry's show off the ground, and I do the graphics, I do all the editing, producing every week, that I want to get this back up and running. So this will be a Pod Avenue production. And I'm kind of, when it comes to the future of TIAWS, I love doing interviews. All right, I love interviewing wrestlers. I love doing it alone. Love doing it with a co-host. Prefer doing it alone, but I may turn this into an interview, a weekly show, which features an interview, and not go in depth like we used to about wrestling news. Not talk 45 minutes about wrestling, but more featuring interviews with indie wrestlers, people trying to get a name for themselves, but also for established, from WWE, having that contact with WWE, trying to get some people on there when they come through town. And also bring on some past guests. Our list of guests are just, whew, I would match that up with any other podcast, our guest list. And I have some links to our most downloaded podcasts when it comes to interviews. And our official webpage is podavenue.com/TIAWS. The link is on our Twitter. I'll be posting it. That's where you can find links to some interviews with Seth Rollins, to Jerry Lawler, EC3, Terry Funk, Billy Gunn, Cole Cabana, Guerrero, just a whole slew of from mainstream WWE wrestlers all the way down to people trying to make it big and trying to make a name for themselves, like a Britt Baker, who is turning heads and also in the ranks of not only indies but also with WWE. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if she is going to be featured on NXT, very, very shortly, especially with this women's tournament coming up. Now, like I said, I lost my podcast smile for a bit, and kind of, Chris Perez with Pod Avenue has kind of rekindled my desire to do this show, and probably won't have any co-hosts. And like I said, probably will be an interview style podcast, getting some people on the phone and joining me for, half an hour, 45 minutes. Let's shooting the shit, talking wrestling, talk about their career, talking about anything in their personal life. So I feel like, and so I'm asking you, and the TIA Wrestling, the Twitter account is active. I checked that. So if you want any names, any wrestlers, any indie wrestlers that you want to be interviewed by me on the show, please send along your suggestions and tag them. I would love to reach out and get some people on. I have some ideas for guests in the coming weeks, but if I can't get a guest for that week, I'll just talk wrestling for 25 minutes, half an hour, some new stuff, give my opinion. But looking to make this more of an interview style podcast, which I love to do. And I love to interview, and I love to get people on the horn and talk wrestling. Also, looking to possibly get some wrestling talking heads on the show as well. Some people who cover wrestling, quote unquote, are wrestling journalists, and get them to talk wrestling as well with some some major stuff that happens in WWE and the indie scene with TNA. Possibly filling in the weeks where I don't have a wrestler, so to speak, on the show, but also having a talking head on the show. And finally, I'm going to be doing some stuff with WrestleZone, with the WZ Daily, WrestleZone Daily, with Nick Hausman of WrestleZone, and being a guest on some of their podcasts. He does a weekly a daily podcast. He also does a Raw recap, a SmackDown recap, and I think a pay-per-view recap and a weekly recap. And so I was on Monday's show this week, and I can link that on I think I linked it on my Twitter account if you want to scroll back, but just talking wrestling with Nick. So you can hear me as a guest with WrestleZone Daily, just talking wrestling, and I'll be sure to retweet that on both the TIA Wrestling account and also the Glenmore CLE in my main account. Whew, other than that, man, when it comes to the future of TIAWS, I hope they get back in the groove, back in the saddle, so to speak, and get this podcast back up and running, and getting some interviews and giving some more recognition to the podcast, and also, talking about other things that might be happening with the Pod Avenue. Definitely have some wrestlers that want to do a podcast and talking to them. Some mainstream WWE guys want to do a podcast, so bringing them on board with Pod Avenue would be terrific. Also, some non-wrestling people want to do podcasts, so it's just a matter of hooking up with them and finally getting over the hump when it comes, because the hardest part about doing a podcast is actually doing the podcast, is actually starting it, because once you start it, you can't stop. Once you give the people what they want, you can't stop. And like I said, I apologize for the hiatus, and I thank you for being a subscriber. If you're not subscribed, we're on iTunes, we're on Stitcher. So I really, truly appreciate you guys sticking around when it comes to TIAWS on podavenue.com/TIAWS for all the links, social media, and also just our RSS feeds when it comes to subscription services for the show. Woo! Man. Feels good to talk about TIAWS. It's been a while. It's like my little baby, my creation. We had some shows that did shitty, download-wise, and some shows that did very well when we had some great guests on the show. Website was getting good traffic. It just lost, like I said, just lost the luster, man. Just lost my smile. Just wasn't fun anymore. And it wasn't fun for like a year. Felt like more of a chore. And the website was getting a lot of hits, so I thought, okay, there's a glimmer of hope. The podcast was climbing. The numbers were climbing every month when it comes to the show. Some shows were just shitty download numbers. But I've been podcasting for about, almost 9 years, so I know about shitty numbers. Starting out, it's tough. But getting some guests were just big, and being able to talk to some guys backstage at AIW was terrific, and getting some guests on with them. Even some interviews that's shitty. Some people didn't want to hear from certain wrestlers. Just, I didn't understand that, but yeah, looking to get this back up and running, and I really appreciate you guys listening. So you'll be hearing my voice each and every week. Well, if you want to. But I'm looking to really make this podcast more interesting than usual. No back and forth talking wrestling, thinking that we know it all about wrestling, and going into storylines, just blah, 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 just ugh. Don't want to do that. I want to have any fun, do some interviews, get chatty with some people, and do a podcast that's each and every week, interview style, and get some talking heads from the wrestling journalist world as well on the show. And just talk some wrestling, just, shoot the shit and not fight about storylines of who should be WWE champion. Like, I actually hated doing that, but I want to be interview. I want to do interviews. I want to do interviews. I want to have people come on and talk wrestling. So let me know what you think at TIA Wrestling or on Twitter at Glenmore CLE. Let me know what you think and what you think the format of the show could be. I could do some, we did some stuff like top entrance, music, top Royal Rumbles. I might do some shows like that when I don't have a guest. My top 5, Hulk Hogan matches or just something like that. Top 5 pay-per-views, top 5 SummerSlam, stuff like that, to where I'm maybe mixing in some sound bites, mixing in some music into it, and just making it more of a story time podcast when it comes to that, and making it a list, a kind of like a podcast list for some shows. So I might be doing that as well. So let me know what you think at TIA Wrestling on Twitter. Wanted to keep this within a half an hour, but what has transpired in wrestling the past few months, did go down to Orlando for WrestleMania. Have some stories. Let's do some story time right now. All right, let's talk about, I know it's a couple months ago, but some stories that I haven't shared, especially on Jerry's podcast, because Jerry would kill me, but because, he doesn't like talking about stuff like that. He wants to get right to the point and get the podcast over with. So here's my chance to Orlando. So we went down to Orlando, Chris and I. I went down to Tampa, visit with Chris, and Chris and I drove over from Tampa to Orlando for WrestleMania week. And it was more of a business trip because we're meeting with Jerry, face-to-face for the first time since agreeing to do the podcast. And just, talking over, the terms of everything and what we're going to do our next move. We had some big boy decisions to make when it came to the podcast. Everything was coming at us fast. We've had ad agencies coming at us about sponsoring the show. We had different networks come at us, different websites want to, partner up. So we had to make a decision. And obviously we went with Midroll, marketing, having them be our ad agency and selling the show via their routes. But that's besides the point. So we were down there for business, some pleasure. Didn't even know we were going to go to WrestleMania because it was late. And, my contacts when it comes to tickets, it was just too late to kind of get tickets. So we didn't even know what we were going to do. We do know, we're invited to some events. We're going to hang out and, talk business and, have a house with a couple of guys that have been on the show, Greg and Ryan. Terrific hanging out with them and their friends. It was a great experience. Poolside in the sun. It was cold up here in Cleveland. It was nice down there in Orlando, so it was nice to get away and hang out with them. But so you get down there on Thursday, and Court Bauer from MLW Radio said, "Hey Glenn, if you want to come down if you want to be here for Walleye Mania, you're on the list. I made the list. You're on the list, and come on. You'll give your wristband, you'll be a VIP, and hang out with everybody." So we had dinner with Jerry. And then I went from, I think I went to Tony Roma's for dinner in Orlando. Really bad food. Not happy with Tony Roma's. Anyway, went to Walleye Mania, which is I think that was downtown Orlando, and went to Walleye Mania, which was amazing. I got there a little late, but I think I got there early because the party didn't start, till later. So I got there like around 11, I think. And went with Michael Kingston from Headlock, which is the comic book that Jerry works with. A lot of wrestlers work with. Check him out on his Twitter feed, Michael Kingston. So we shared a lift to Walleye Mania. We immediately went backstage in the VIP area. It was like a who's who of WWE stars. We had the New Day was there. Jericho showed up. Mark Henry was there, and then you had a lot of indie stars. Oh, NXT. We had, I think, Kimberly was there back there. Britt Baker ran up to her, gave her a huge hug. Obviously, she's dating Adam Cole, so I met Adam Cole, hang out with him, had a drink with Britt. I haven't seen her in a while, so we caught up and talked. I officially met Bruce and Conrad Thompson. They were back there. Went to the back room to meet Court, who was I don't think he remembers. It was pretty wild. He remembers meeting me, but went in the back room. EC3 was taking photos. It was just a great time of All That Mania. I didn't make it out to the actual like room where like all the peasants were at, but just hanging out in VIP for a few hours was a pretty cool experience. And meeting some people, finally meeting them, talking to them was via social media, but being able to meet them face to face was pretty cool. And also it was great to catch up with Britt Baker. So then the next day, Friday and Saturday, we were at the WrestleCon. Jerry was signing, and we were selling the podcast T-shirts. I got to meet some people who listened to the podcast, and selling some shirts. And then Jerry was supposed to do a panel on the main stage at WrestleCon with Terry Funk, and Terry Funk could not make the trip. So they asked Jerry, well, you're going to go up there, but we don't know what you want to do because, Terry's not here. So we decided to do a live recording of Dinner with the King in front of the audience, and then we brought on the Rock and Roll Express last minute. This is all last minute, too, so we didn't have time to prepare. The Rock and Roll Express came on the stage, and Jerry has a very, very long history with them, friends for many, many years. And we had them on the stage. The video's on YouTube. I think the link to video. The video's on YouTube of the interview, but we did a live Dinner with the King recording. I took some questions from the audience. That was like an hour. And that's part of the, you can listen to that on the podcast feed for Dinner with the King, our Rock and Roll Express interview. And then we, I ran into some people. Our intern, I'm not sure if he's still the intern, Justin Summers was down there. AIW, Britt Baker was down there. EC3 was obviously down there. Ran into some people that I haven't seen in a while. It was good to catch up with some people. Good to meet some new, some followers of the podcast also down there saying hello. WrestleCon's great. Love WrestleCon. Saw Big Van Vader, but I didn't say hi. I was running around, but I know he was signing there. And I saw JR. JR and King were talking. I was hanging out with King and JR. Of course, this is right after JR lost his wife, Jan, to a horrible accident. And JR was back there. Matt Hardy came in and kind of, I obviously didn't tell anybody, but headed towards, okay, I'm going to WWE. So this was Saturday. So you knew that he was going, I knew he was going to WWE. He was talking about it with Jerry and JR. And then watched him take some photos. And then I didn't go to NXT or anything. Didn't go anywhere in any other shows. Just kind of hung out at the house and hung out with Jerry for a good portion of the day. Went to Hooters, of course, one of Jerry's establishments that he likes to go to. Chris and I went with Jerry. And then we just, like I said, we just hung out. And WrestleMania was Sunday. Raw was Monday, and then I went to SmackDown on Tuesday. And then I finally came back home here in Cleveland. But it was nice to go down there. Well, I saw Jesse, who is a good friend of the show, loyal supporter of TIAWS and any podcast I do. But she lives in Orlando. It was good to see her, and she's been. God, she used to listen to the Dugout Sports Show when I did that podcast, live podcast, 6 years ago. And it was good to finally meet her. And I know she's probably listening, but was finally able to meet her was awesome. So like I said, a good week at WrestleMania. So WrestleMania happened. I didn't go to WrestleMania, but I went to the WrestleMania after party. Jerry got back from the stadium and said, hey, come on over. Got to the WWE hotel, which this year was totally off the beaten path. Usually, it's downtown and there's fans lining up the streets. Not this one. The resort was, what was it? The JW, I think. No, it wasn't the JW. I forget. But it was an amazing hotel. It was a resort, basically, and there was no fans. It was like no fans were able to even get there. And a lot of security, a lot of sheriffs around. So you get to the WrestleMania after party, and WrestleMania isn't even over yet. And you get there when the Undertaker and Roman Reigns were wrestling, and so I'm sitting there, we're eating a meal with Jerry and Lauren, his fiance. Titus O'Neil sat with us. Gary Barnage, from formerly with the Browns, and D'Angelo Williams ate with us. Obviously saw Mike, Miz, and a lot of the wrestlers came starting to come in towards the end of the Undertaker match. Ambrose was double fisting, had a beer and some wine at the same time. But they stopped serving alcohol like at 2 a.m. It was cut off, and this party was going to like 5 or 6 a.m. People were dancing. The dance floor was bumping. Flo Rida was there, hanging out as well. And I watched the Undertaker match. Kane was standing around by us, and Michael P.S. Hayes. I know Greg will love Michael P.S. Hayes. I wanted to do a shot with Michael P.S. Hayes so bad, but everybody was around him. They were replaying WrestleMania on this huge screen in the ballroom, and he was, talking with a lot of the wrestlers who wrestled. He would bring one over, and they would watch the match and talk about it. And Shane McMahon walked in. He had a bottle of Jack Daniels. Shane walks in, sits down next to Michael P.S. Hayes, and they're chugging it back and forth, this bottle of Jack. And I thought to myself, if this was any time to have a shot with him, this is my opportunity. But I was too chicken to. Jerry was like, let's go over there, introduce yourself, say you're friends with Jerry and with the King, and he'll do one with you for you. I just chickened out. I wanted to. There's always next year. Knock on wood that nothing happens to Michael P.S. Hayes, but yeah, ran into Goldust. Him and I DM a lot back and forth. Ran into him. Obviously Zach, some people I've hung out before. Dolph, but it was great. And then you had Titus O'Neil on the dance floor, doing some shimmy, shaking, dancing. A lot of people were dancing. Lana was there. Handsome Rusev. Okay, this was so sad. Just remember this. So Rusev is hurt, legit hurt. And this, a couple months ago, I think he was just diagnosed with whatever his injury is. So he was kind of bummed. But so he was sitting on the table all by himself, not even on his phone, just watching the party. And Lana is dancing on the dance floor all by herself, just dancing away. And it was just sad to see handsome Rusev sitting by himself at the table. I don't think he was even eating. He was just watching everybody. I think some people came up to him, shook his hand, obviously. The WrestleMania after party, people who don't know, it's for friends and family. There's no fans. This is a very locked down party. You literally have to walk in with someone that people would recognize if you want to get in. But you have to have a wristband. Fans cannot get in. It's like layers and layers of security. They even had the Undertaker's hat and jacket and gloves when they brought it back from WrestleMania. In the corner, there was a guard looking over it, making sure nobody would take it. Undertaker did not come to the after party. I think his wife did, though. A lot of obviously the Divas are there. Enzo Amore was dancing too. But not a lot of fans, which is good, because some fans are gonna get a little bit overly too excited. Randy Orton okay. So I've been to a few WrestleMania after parties, the official WWE ones, and Randy Orton never really makes an appearance, but he did this time. Randy Orton was dancing it up, he has the right to, obviously. Had a great match and made some. I'm sure he made bank that night just for his one match. But Randy Orton dancing with his wife on the dance floor, had an e-cig in his hand, and then he was watching. And then so they had it on the big screen, all the WrestleMania, replaying it, and it was time for Triple H's match. Randy Orton runs over to the big screen and does like the Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, point at each other. And when Triple H was making his entrance, Randy was doing that. Obviously, Triple H was not there at the party. Big wigs do not. Vince doesn't go to the party. Stephanie doesn't go to the party. John Cena doesn't go to the party. The big guys, don't go to the party. Shane was there, which was kind of surprising. Kurt Angle was there at the after party. All the Hall of Famers, DDP was there, but yeah, Randy was doing that when Triple H was coming out, saying that he's a man. He was being very vocal about how he felt about Triple H, which is in a very positive way. So I was there from like 11 until maybe 3:34, and it was a good time. It was a very, very good time at WrestleMania after party. It's very interesting. And no one dances. Like, everybody's just sitting around eating and talking and walking around talking. And the dance floor, there's music playing. There's nobody on the dance floor. There's nobody dancing. And it always takes like a couple of the divas to get on. The women wrestlers to get on the dance floor and start dancing. Then all the guys come and this gathers around the dance floor. Some good dancing and some bad dancing. And then once the dance floor starts bouncing, like it just stays bouncing. So they cut off the alcohol like at 2 a.m. So all the little mini bars, they were taken back, and everybody's like, what? And like half the roster didn't even get there till like 1:32 anyway because of how late WrestleMania was, and the stadiums, it was a good 25 minutes, half an hour away with traffic. So it was a late arriving crowd. So I'm sure John Thorne from AIW would like this. The bottles of Tito's were plentiful. People were bringing down from their rooms, or people were going out and buying some liquor and bringing it back and sneaking it in. But the bottles, there was plenty of Tito's. They were consumed, especially I think Miz and obviously me, myself, and Lauren, Jerry's fiance, had a lot of Tito's. They're hiding it with the water, with the big coolers of water, trying to hide it. But good times, WrestleMania after party. Great to see a lot of people that I haven't seen in a while, especially at Wall-E Mania. Wall-E Mania was terrific. I'd love to go next year for New Orleans. And New Orleans is great. It's terrific. All right. Don't know what else to get into for this podcast, rambling on about WrestleMania after party. Happened 2 months ago. But still, it's great to be podcasting again, especially with Jerry Lawler for Dinner with the King, but also for this podcast. Gets us back up and running. I don't have a certain day of the week. I'm just going to post a show. Maybe I'll do it every Thursday like it is today. I'll try to get some guests on to do the show, and looking forward to talking more wrestling, talking with certain people, and I want your feedback. What you guys think of revamping the show again? This is like season 3, all right? Season 3 of This Is Awesome Wrestling Show. And like I said, I apologize for the hiatus. Looking forward to getting back on the horse on a weekly basis with This Is Awesome Wrestling Show. Looking back to talking wrestling. Looking forward to, talking with some new people, and then bringing back some old guests as well. Let me know your ideas. Let me know what you think of the podcast, what you guys think of Dinner with the King podcast. Follow the show. We're on Facebook, This Is Awesome Wrestling Show, and also on Twitter, TIA Wrestling. And you can follow me at Glenmore CLE. And that'll wrap it up for this week. I'll talk to you guys next week. This is Awesome Wrestling Show out.
The preceding show is a Pod Avenue production.